from our own experience. So let me get started, and again, let's make this interactive. We are here only so that we give you some better clarity than what we had when we started. Right? Even though I had been in the industry for 7-8 years before, I didn't quite know what product management was. I didn't quite know how marketing is done. Only after spending a year there, I really began to understand and appreciate what these roles are. Right? So let me get started. So I'll primarily talk about product management, that's what I do. So the role is something of a nebulous thing in the industry, right? It's not something which is very well explained. Every industry has a product manager, but it has a different definition. Some places it's a very restrictive definition, sort of like a project manager, saying that somebody has decided, okay, we have to make a website, can you go make the website happen? Right? It should have sales, it should have some part of social stuff, go make it happen. Right? There is that part of it, there is the CEO part of it. The CEO part of it is that we have no idea what we want to do, we want to achieve this big goal. Go figure out what happens. Right? Most companies fall somewhere in that spectrum, right? And I'll also talk about, depending on the size of your company, what kind of philosophy they have. That can also vary. The amount of freedom you have and the kind of things are expected of you, those will also change. Right, so what is the project manager part of it, which is the thing that you would have to do even if you are the CEO kind of a person, right? Which is you would have to come up with requirements. Somebody has to do this work, whether it's the technology team or the analytics team or the operations team. You have to note that stuff down, right? So if, for example, one of the things we want to start doing is how do you have credit card based payments. So I work for Taxi for Sure, so we want to start figuring out how to do credit card payments. So that will involve a lot of things. If I were a project manager kind of person, somebody else would have done all that thinking and would have told me, now figure out how it has to go onto the website. Right? Then I'll say, okay, it has to look like this, you have to, if it fails, you have to do this, all of these things, right? So capturing the requirements, the product requirement document, all of that has to be captured very, very clearly, right? So the way I say, is it not on? Sorry for the technical difficulties, guys. Is it any better? Thumbs up if you can. Cool. Awesome. So I was talking about the product requirement document. So how I tell the team is that tomorrow if I'm hit by a bus, you guys should be able to function without me, right? So it's something what we try to follow, so that it's detailed enough. And yeah, so the project person would coordinate with the technical and design teams, figure out what it should look like, make it happen and stuff. Once it's launched, work with the analytics team to do it yourself and figure out how it's working. If you're talking about credit cards, how many times is it failing, which credit cards work better than the others, things like that, right? So the CEO person role is very different, right? Here you would have this broad charter, right? So for example, when I joined, my charter was mobile, and I was told make mobile happen. Right, make it successful. So if it means making a mobile app, make that happen. On the driver side, drivers also are given a mobile device. So what should happen there? So right from that part, what is really important for the business? So for example, in the product team now, we have 3 to 5 years of visibility into what the business has to do. And that's not something that that was inorganically just told to me one day, right? Because as a business, we are also evolving, we are trying to figure that out. 3 to 5 years, what has to happen has been a journey for me. This 1 year, now it's very, very clear what we have to do. And all the things that have to happen to make that happen, right? Across teams, across functions, that is something we have to figure out. Right? So across teams means what? At Taxi for Sure, we have, we just use the board. Mali students, if you can't see the board, let me know. Right, so we have a geographic matrix organization. We have.
Can somebody switch on the light which focuses on the black whiteboard?
So while that happens, right, let me just. While the light stuff works out, I'll just briefly tell you what I'm saying here. All the columns are in verticals. This is what you would have in a typical company, right? Your marketing, analytics, tech, design.
We can't see the whiteboard. Can anyone focus the light?
Yeah, so we are working that out. I'll just explain it while that happens. So the columns are your various verticals that you have in a company, your departments, right? And the rows are the various branches that we have. So the branches are P&L owners. So Bangalore, Chennai, Delhi, and as of today, Hyderabad. So So where does product fit? Product is another row. Right? It is something that has to coordinate across all the divisions. You can't believe it in 2014, right? Better guys?
I think the whiteboard is too far from the camera, so
Okay, no,
you have to
no,
just explain it, so it's fine.
Cool. So again, like I was saying, product is another horizontal that has to coordinate across functions and make this happen. So if you have to do a credit card payment, for example, right? Small example, but it starts from you talking to various outside companies. So PayU, Citrus Pay, PayZippy, any number of companies are contacting us. How do you figure out which is the best one? You talk to the finance team, figure out what are the numbers like, what are the commercials they are offering. You would talk to the analytics team to figure out what kind of numbers they are seeing compared to in the industry, how are each of these things working, maybe some kind of market research, stuff like that. Once this has to go on the road, right, there is a company called EasyTrack. They are saying that you can buy devices where people can swipe credit cards in the car. If you have to do that, you have to talk to the operations team. They will tell you there is no way thousands of drivers are going to use this device and not take cash from people. When they have a choice of getting cash or getting credit card payments, they would want cash. Operations will tell you that's a no-go. Right? So as a product person, you have to make sure you talk to all the teams. Right? It's the easiest job is to go to the tech team and tell them, guys, we want credit card payments. It is done in 2 days. Right? This is what it should look like. It's a solved problem. Right? But for a unique business that you are in, to do it well, you have to coordinate across teams and take those calls. Right? So that's something the product team has to do. And yeah, the rest of it is very analytical, a lot of metrics that will tell you what has to be done and how it's working, all of those things. Right, and moving on to the next product. As CEO, you won't solve one problem and keep doing that, right? So in a small company like us, we can't afford to have people just solving that one problem. We want to hundreds of other things that we have to, right? So day in the life, this have split across various stakeholders as well as various teams that we work with, right? So in the product team, you review progress, you share notes, raise concerns. This is a daily stand-up meeting that we have. We talk about how all our metrics are doing. We are on top of every single thing. So we know in Chrome what is our bounce rate like on Windows, right? So that level of detail we need to have. We have a team of analysts which helps us keep on top of these numbers, right? So with marketing, Saurabh and I are sometimes on the other side of the table, right? So I'll be asking what is happening these numbers. He'll ask me, why is your conversion bad? So we talk about what the conversion funnels are. Conversion funnel is basically somebody starts doing the transaction and at various points they follow up and they do the end of the transaction, right? So we talk about that stuff. With the tech team, we want to clarify the requirements. So before you get hit by the bus, they need to know everything that has to be done, right? Review progress, take cost and product experience. Analytics team, at least at Taxi for sure, we are very, very data driven. So anything that we do has to have a data backing. So keep on top of numbers, do a lot of analysis once the data comes in, right? So the management, so the operations part of it, I told you guys, right? So if you have to do a product change, talk to the operations people, get their mind, figure out how it has to become successful. Also do stuff to make sure you are solving their pain points. Because in our business at least, we're very operations heavy. We want to make sure they don't find any problems, especially now we're in. Actually, I just assumed everybody would know. Sorry about that, guys. Taxi for sure, just to give you context for this talk, right? We are an aggregator. We have thousands of taxis which use our devices, run software that helps us track them, as well as when people are doing journeys, give them information about customers, as well as track their journeys, things like that, right? So we are a technology, analytics, operations, marketing platform. So we aggregate supply on one side, we aggregate demand on the other side, right? So if you understand Redbus, Make My Trip, Flipkart with their marketplace model, right? You understand us. So just replace the movie theaters or Book My Show with taxi operators, replace movie theaters with or tickets with taxi rides, and
This is a prepaid service.
Sorry?
This is a prepaid service.
So the prepaid is what I was telling you about the credit card, right? If you have credit card, then it's a prepaid service. There won't be any cash liability. So that's something.
So if you're an aggregator, you get a percentage of it, or you
You
take
get a
the money,
percentage of
you get a percentage.
yeah. So our device calculates the fare. You know at the end of it how much you have to charge, and you get a card of it. Right? right? So it's a simple business that we are in, but phenomenal scale and a lot of growth that can happen, right? So yes, the operations part of it is a very, very big thing, right? So you want to make sure that part of the problem is solved well. The management part of it is very interesting. Again, because of how we do things in the kind of stage where we are, a lot of thinking has to be done around what the vision of the company is, where it has to go in a few years, and that's something that's expected of us. Working on this self again, lot of metrics you are tracking, but you have to figure out what of those make sense, how successfully you are doing it, stuff like that. I talked about the partners, vendors, all these guys, right? Every other day, some of the other companies are talking to us. They say, why don't we integrate this because we'll give you better customer tracking. You do something else, we'll help you figure out where your customers are physically. So a lot of interesting things like that we keep talking to a lot of startups. So Saurabh will talk a little bit about the market. And again, if there are any questions, please stop us as and when you get the questions, happy to answer.
Do we have any questions?
So how do you guys play with the existing camp services like Miru camps or whatever?
So for the morning guys, the question was, how do you play with, do you play well, do you play nicely with the existing operators, right? So because we are an aggregator, we are free to work with anybody. Meru, Ola, Uber, any of these guys we could work with. We never work directly with drivers. So our sell is that you do your business. If you want more business, come work with us, right? So technically we could work with Meru. We have worked with Mega, Cellcats, Cats, these kind of guys in the past. Meru clearly sees a disadvantage in working with us, whatever that reason is. So they don't work with us.
So you don't go directly with the drivers?
No. So we work with an operator. Operator would say I have 100 taxis, 500 taxis. They come to us and we give them software. We tell them how they can give that to their drivers, and we work with the operators.
They must be already having something similar, right? Some software similar to this thing to track their drivers.
No, it will be small vendors.
Yeah, so the small vendors are the ones who really see benefit in working with us. The big guys could also do it. Right? But because we are a technology company, we don't have to be encumbered by the operations. They were started off buying inventory. So they have thousands of taxis that they bought and they need to pay the EMI maintenance. They have to worry about that stuff. So their technology platform might not be as evolved, but I am not, personally I am not aware of the level of...
So how do you enforce quality of service? Because you don't have control over these guys.
So that's a really key thing, because no matter how evolved we are, how many ISB people you put behind the scenes, right? Ultimately it's the untrained, unskilled person who's delivering the service, who might not have the concept of customer service. I won't say this is a solved problem, it's a continuous one. Good morning guys, you heard the question? Yeah, so we are trying to figure that stuff out. Currently what we have is a very strong CRM team. So we use analytics to figure out what the problems are. Before it happens, we know issues have happened. There is strong tracking of whether a cab is reached, not reached. There is the ops team which takes care of all that stuff. We give various mechanisms for people to reach out to us. If you see our Facebook page, it looks like a bloodbath, but we are looking at less than 1% of daily trips which happen end up in issues. Right, so that's a number we track at the. So this is the chart that we have in the office that everybody sees. There is this big screen which is put up on every floor. This is the number you see. Yeah, exactly. So the number that we have is each city, right, and so on. We have the transactions that we have every day, whatever 2,000, 3,000, whatever number, right? And then you have the cancelled issues, done issues, and app percentage. These are the things that are really, really important to us. This is just top line of the company, right? How much money you are making. This is when we have not been able to give a customer a taxi after promising them, right? It's a really, really bad thing to do. Right? That's the business we are in. After we've given them a taxi, it's called the done issue. We've given them a taxi, but they are not happy with the service. We cannot have them say that to us, right? So the CEO of the company sees it, every single employee sees this number, right? It's very important to us. And app is again something that is a priority to us for various reasons, right? So that's something we put up. So in many ways,
we have a question here. What does your product roadmap look like currently, and who are the key stakeholders you consult with while making that product roadmap?
Yeah, interesting question, man. So currently, so at least when this product roadmap was being made, right, the product team was quite young. I had never done product management before. The team had joined maybe 2 months, 3 months back. So it was a very interesting exercise to do. To begin with, it was based on whatever we had experienced and what we thought the company should do, right? And a few months after that, what happened was we did this big goal setting exercise where we said, what do we want to do 1 year, 2 years, 3 years from now? And we set really crazy ambitious goals like 20x, 30x growth and stuff like that, right? And so we had to figure out how our products would help us achieve that goal. So we started off making that product roadmap saying, this is a really crazy, insane goal. How do we make that happen? So we understood, I don't know if you guys know the Google's 10x thing that they're doing. Have you heard of that? So after Larry Page came and like full on became CEO, right? He had this 10x thing. He's telling everybody in the company, just think 10x. Whatever you're doing, plan for 10x. So anything that you plan for the normal growth, 20%, 30%, that will just completely fall apart if you have to get to 10x. So your thinking has to change completely. So that's something that we did as part of that roadmap because we had to get to such crazy numbers. So in order to do that, we consulted with all the departments. That was how the exercise was done. So we have something called the executive committee, which has heads of all the departments. So in that, we presented this, we talked about what they are planning. So the idea is all of these things would come together. So that product itself is something that will tie together a lot of things. But all the departments would have their initiative. We will figure out how these things align. And we have a plan for 1 or 2 years. Right? So that's how we came up with it. All the stakeholders that we have are, all the teams that we have inside. We don't look at competition so much because that's not how we do things. But different companies have different ways of doing. Just to answer your question of more specifically what's on the roadmap, right? Currently our product has a lot of gaps, right? Imagine not being able to pay by credit card. Right? That's such a big gap, right? Or for example, we don't work with corporates at all. We only work with retail customers like you and me. So a lot of products around that. So the goal with that is we broke it down into 3 goals. We said the geographic expansion is one goal, transactions is one goal, and online transactions is one goal, which is stuff coming through your website, app, stuff like that. Right? So a lot of things supporting that. We have some very interesting thoughts around 2 to 3 new lines of business that we want to get into, which are sort of related. And when we launch those, right, it will make sense that we have to do that. So some of those things are on the cards. Is that too general or you wanted more details?
Could you please talk a little bit about your team and your organization hierarchy, that how does it work? Because I'm really interested to know that you are not having your own taxi and you are able to provide a service with so much guarantee.
Yeah, and so this will be about taxi for sure, but I think it should give you an idea of most companies who are doing something like this.
Just to add to this question, my question is what particular need you are feeling? Because like the Meru Cab, they are already giants. They are having huge amount of money, they must be having their own app. So,
Right. So did you guys hear the question, Kumari? Yeah, so first of all, Meru doesn't work with us, but if they have to work with us, it's to make sure they get
let's say any other vendor.
yeah. So most people they don't have the technology savvy, marketing savvy to get the kind of demand that we would get, right? In a day, we have to say no to thousands of people because there is so much demand that we are able to generate, and we have to cap it because we don't want to spend too much money for people we are saying no, right? So being able to generate that demand requires some crazy marketing stuff, which Saurabh will talk about, right? So this is, any business would have to do that. Bookmashop would have to do the same thing to get people to book tickets. So in a way, you're creating that sort of consumer behavior also. Right? Nobody thinks of taxis as the first way of traveling, right? So some way of that happens, and not many people are able to do that. So being able to generate that much demand and aggregate that demand, that is why somebody will come. Then there is the stuff that happens in the middle. In an efficient way, without too much manual intervention, being able to orchestrate this supply on the road, right? Because if you think about it, you guys have done any ops courses so far? The reorder point, stuff like that, you get the problem, right? So, So in a simple way, right? You have inventory. Inventory keeps running out. You could stop until you run out of inventory, then order. Right? But there is an efficient way where you can, at a certain point, where you know where the demand is coming, at a certain point you say, let me order some more. That's your reorder point. Right? So Flipkart, if they have to manage their inventory, they do it like that. They say, okay, I have 100 books, when I get down to 20, I buy. By the time I get to 0, the 100 books would have come. right? For us, that's a much harder problem because our inventory is people. There are drivers who are moving around the city. You cannot say that when somebody wants to book, it's in my warehouse. That driver could be anywhere. The driver could be asleep when you have to go to the airport, right? So it's a tough problem to crack, saying take all these random drivers and have systems and processes in place so that in an automated way, drivers are able to reach the point every single time. So that is something that we give, which operators on their own would not be able to do. Right? And to answer the question about the organization, so the organization structure that we have is, so we have all these departments that I have here, right? Marketing, analytics, ops, this, that. Some of them, so we have two co-founders, both of them from IMA, started the company 3 years back. So we just finished our 3rd year anniversary on Thursday. So one person heads some of those departments, another heads other departments. In the product team, there is really no hierarchy because we don't have a VP. I joined as a product manager. I'm sort of pseudo playing that role, which is something that should tell you, right? The amount of confidence they place on ISB students, and if you're able to deliver, what sort of heights a company can take you. So it's me as a product manager. We have the Anushri Bishnoi. I don't know if she was. Mali, was she there in the orientation week? No. Okay, so she joined us from ISB last year. She is another product manager. We have a few associate product managers who have joined us from, one person joined from campus, other people laterals, and we have a couple of product analysts. That's the product team. Martin, if you want to talk about what kind of team you have.
So there's me, there's one guy called Rana, who's from IIT Kharagpur, with experience. Then we have a couple of analysts. And we have a person handling PR, we have a person handling social media marketing, we have a person handling SEM and SEO. We have some agencies we are outsourcing some stuff to for SEM and SEO as well. And up to Mayor, the guy who is taking care of marketing, and Raghu is taking care of product development.
So fairly flat organization, it's something we like and something that helps us move very fast. And, all the teams work very closely together. Does that answer the org structure question? Yes. Yeah, so in very general terms, the kind of people that we have there, and this is a story across a lot of young companies, is that none of us knew either the role that we were going to do or the industry, which is very strange, right? You will hear that out of ISB when you go, you can either change your role or your industry, but not both. Right? A lot of us got to do both of that, and that was very interesting for us, right? Like I think you can, Saurabh is a good example, right? You've never done marketing before, you've never, I mean, e-commerce, travel, taxi, however you want to think about a company, right? You've not done either of that, I have never done any of that. So we want people who come in with fresh ideas. We mostly look for people with potential. So you have a lot of people in the management kind of a thing who have management degrees, prior experience in other companies. And then you have this layer of operations people, right? So it's very strange kind of an organization, but very interesting because we have to solve problems for people whose jobs you've never done. So it's an interesting sort of space. Any other questions, guys? Product management.
Are you planning to enter any tier 2 cities other than metros?
Yeah, tier 2 cities are in the works. So we have some interesting ideas for how to do that because every city is very different from each other, so some interesting thoughts around that. But the plan is to be everywhere. So,
What is the investment that the client makes into this venture?
sure, I can just to make sure. I am happy to answer any taxable share questions. If you guys, it's not a topic of general interest, then I can stick to product management and go TFS session later. I guess. It's okay. It's okay, right? Cool. So clients, as in investors, you're talking about.
Your
Customers?
Yeah.
Yeah, customers who pay drivers, that is the cash thing.
Not the retail customers, I'm talking about the vendors that you get, the operators that you get on board with you.
Correct. So there are a number of ways they work with us. Currently we move to a model where they pay us a lump sum of money, kind of like your Airtel or prepaid sort of thing, and money keeps getting deducted from that. Because we don't collect cash from drivers, right? They pay us upfront, and whatever commission you have to pay gets cut from that. You want to reduce that operational burden, right? Imagine every single trip you are doing, the driver has to come and give you money. That's not sustainable. So that's where we add value in terms of technology and.
So device and everything you guys provide.
So device we don't provide. Device is something they get. The way to work with us is very simple. You come, you have a device, we install software in it, and you're good to go.
That's it. Mostly phones.
It's an Android phone that we do.
Mostly Android.
You had a question?
Yes, I wanted to ask you, how are you different from Ola cabs? They also use the same technology, I think?
So you can think of Ola, Uber, any of us as in the same way. For the customers, you can go one level further. For them, your Sky cabs, Easy cabs, Melo cabs, all of them are the same. And because in the end, you want a taxi, you get to a service. It doesn't matter if they own the taxis or they are a technology platform, any of that. It's an interesting challenge. We don't own those taxis because the drivers are not our employees. Still, you have to get great service out of them. So, but yeah, for all practical purposes, Ola, Uber, and taxi for sure are the same. How we do things is very different internally. Our operational model is very different, business model is very different, but for all practical purposes, it's the same.
So coming back to the product management role, could you talk about what you looked in, say, a startup, what motivated you to go to a startup rather than a big company like Amazon or Google with a product manager role, and at the same time, what the startup was looking at from a recruiting point of view, like was there anything different?
Sure. I can talk about that. So I have a few slides later about what kind of stages companies have, how do we select a startup. Yeah. This is what I have. I'll cover it over here. I'll talk about how to interview process and stuff like that as well.
I have a remark to make. My wife recently used taxi for show from Delhi to the railway station, and she was really impressed with your service. So she left a very positive remark.
So we are always prepared to hear something bad because this is a fantastic thing. I mean, just to digress, this is a fantastic thing about being in a B2C company, right? Your friends would use it, your family would use it, you would use that service, right? I've always worked in enterprise sort of companies. I've never had that feeling somebody comes and tells you, you did this, I worked on it, I used it and I really liked it, right? So that's a great feeling. But sorry, your question was?
Yeah, so basically, she was really impressed with the service. Obviously, there was no downtime. She got this taxi immediately, and it cost her much less than what it would cost her otherwise. So I wonder, how are you managing that sort of price structure, making sure that you are charging less than the others, without a fleet of taxis?
Right, so it's a simple thing. People who have been in a city where auto drivers charge by meters, anybody been in that kind of city? Right? People who have been in cities where they don't charge by the meter. Right? Same city. Right? So that is not the thing even with taxis, right? They could charge you less. So it's not like what we are doing is price gouging the driver to benefit the customer. These are fair prices. These are prices where last month the driver made $93,000. Right? So don't regret your ISB just yet. He has a very tough life that he has to live. But drivers make that kind of money with us. Right? And he's not losing money on every trip. We don't pay the driver extra money for every trip that he's done. Right? So this is a fair pricing that we have. The only reason why we are able to charge lower prices is because we have efficiency. If a driver is earning that much money, he doesn't mind if he's taking less money for every trip. An auto driver charges you more. He charges you more at night because he doesn't know what's going to happen at the end of that trip. Our drivers don't have that problem. They know that as soon as they finish a trip, bing, their phone is going to go and they're going to get another customer's details. Right? So that's how, that's the efficiency that affords us to do these things.
Hi. Considering the last year's reports which I saw, all the companies which were there in the cap set had declared losses. And considering the competition that's there, how do you think that's going to change? Do you think that's something which is going to prevail for the next couple of years, or there would be a lot of consolidation?
Again, the cab company thing, right? You can split it into two kinds of companies, right? These asset-light companies like Ola, Uber, Taxi for Sure, and Mero sort of moving towards that. And then your old-school taxi companies which are owning their own cabs, right? We are a technology company. We have zero cost to deliver a service, right? Our cost would be when a person calls our call center, the call connecting cost, the SMS that we send to a person, those are our costs. For them, it's maintenance of the car, the salary that they have to pay to a driver, the EMI for the car, things like that, right? Those companies will continue to make losses. even more so because we are taking away more and more of their business. We haven't made a loss. Our branches are already profitable, which is why we have been able to get more and more funding. Ola has gotten more funding. Uber yesterday morning, $1.2 billion of funding they got. Right? Not valuation, that's the funding they got. Right? So just last year, without even this sort of thing, more than $1 billion were pumped into the taxi space worldwide. Right? This is all your Flywheel, Uber, Sidecar, relay rides. Some number of companies are doing this. Right? So this is a problem everybody around the world is trying to solve. These companies are all profitable. The only reason they'll lose money is if they are giving free rides to you on campus. So certain companies know to do, but yeah. We don't have $500 million, so we won't give free rides. But when we launch in Hyderabad with all the credit card and all that stuff being done, right, we'll have something interesting for you guys.
You made a huge transition on your website in the last 6 months, so congratulations for that. There's a huge mismatch in demand and supply. So in the morning and the evening office hours, there's a huge demand. Right? However, during say 11 to 4, there's hardly a demand. So how do you match? How do you handle this? The second one is many times when there's
so as the product team, as a marketing team, we have to ask these questions. At what point do we want to do dynamic pricing? At what point do we want to do surge pricing? Those are things that will help us match demand and supply. Absolutely right that word of mouth has a big role to play in these kinds of things, especially a service that you would use 2-3 times a day. Right? How many times would you buy a book on Flipkart? Right? Every day you have to go somewhere. So this is a service that will have very, very heavy repeat use. First time guy, does he ever come back? If you say no to a guy who's booked 3 times, does he come back? Right? So a lot of thinking has to go into that. But this is not a problem that will be solved with one thing, right? To chip away at it using hundreds of different things. For us, over the last few months, we used to have something we used to call 2 humps. Right? Exactly what he said. Morning, during office hours, huge amount of demand and not as many cabs. In the middle of the day, not much demand and cabs are lying free, they want to go home. Evening, again a lot of demand. Again, cabs are not there, we say no to a lot of people. So over time, the humps have become smaller because this thing has been lifted. It's an ongoing problem. And, so we believe surge pricing, dynamic pricing, those kinds of things will solve the problem. Something we are yet to do. So again, there was a question on the roadmap and stuff like that. Right? These are things that would come into the roadmap. Once the more basic underlying low-hanging fruit kind of problems are solved, we'll get to these kinds of interesting things as well.
Have you explored the possibility of taxi sharing, or do you already support it?
Damn it guys, product roadmap, you're taking it all the way from me. Yes, this is something we want to do. In fact,
because that has too many challenges.
Absolutely. So this is the only way in which drivers make more money, customers pay less, the company also makes more money. And you say no to fewer people, right? To answer your question about demand supply matching. During office hours, you say 2 of you pair up in a taxi. Right? That's 1 less taxi on the road, customers are paying less, driver earns more. We say no to 1 less customer for each of those shared rides. Right? That's something we want to do.
Because if you can actually have an efficient solution to it,
absolutely,
you probably beat all your competitors.
Absolutely. So again, at the risk of saying something to you guys who might join Ola or Uber or any of these companies, this is something on the roadmap for us. One of the interns actually did that. It's a project he called Pushpak.
Are there legal issues around it? Can you share a gap?
There are legal issues around it. The Carriage Act of 1965 prevents some of these things, multiple pickup, multiple drop. But legislation is something we've had to fight before, and it's something we have to get to. But yeah, so those are all interesting things that you have to do when you're in a young company trying to do something not done before. Uber, you must have heard, right? Every other country they go into, the Prime Minister puts it on his agenda that I'm going to stamp these guys out, right? Because they are breaking up that taxi lobby and a lot of legislation which is there.
If you don't mind, I want to answer this question.
Please.
If 2 customers agree to share the cab, then there is no problem legally. It's only if the taxi service provider forces the customers to share the cab, then there's a legal issue in it. But if the customers themselves agree to share a cab and they approach you together, then there's no legal issue.
Yeah, so in that case, somebody is paying for it, right? Like, you guys probably have already started sharing those, I'm going to the airport, who else wants to go?
Can you repeat the question?
So the question was, is it illegal to do ride sharing? And the rebuttal was that if the customers agree on their own to share a ride, then it's not illegal. So yeah, so that's something you guys would have already done for airport trip sharing and stuff. So cool. Guys, just if you don't mind, I'll just quickly run through the rest of it. Maybe you'll get more ideas about other things, and we'll take more answers, more questions after that, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Yeah? Because there's some stuff around startups, why startups, big startups. I think those are interesting as well. You can talk about that.
Only a few would like to go into marketing post ISB.
We should have asked that. No? Is anybody? Sorry, I don't do this very often.
So, just give me an idea what do you think marketing is? It's been one term, right? This is what a few answers. Because from my perspective, it's totally different. I had no now writing is totally different from what I assumed it to be.
In India, marketing is predominantly involved into relationship building because people
More customers and how do you get the customers in to try the first time, and that will involve, I mean, right from the design of the app to where you spend money to get customers. I think that is mainly what in e-commerce marketing is taken as.
Anybody else?
Creating a need and creating a need and delivering it profitably to the customer.
Gaining market share through mind share.
Grabbing a piece of the mental real estate.
Good answer is all of that. So here's what, at least, so I've been at Taxi for Sure handling this marketing manager only for 3 weeks now. So I can't talk as much as Satej did. But what I figured out is like there are two aspects of marketing: performance and brand. Performance is everything that you do with metric driven. You plan, you execute, and then you see the results, and you again replan and re-execute. So I am currently handling online marketing for Taxi for Sure. So on a day-to-day level, I look at numbers like cost of acquisition of a customer. You know, if you are spending 100 rupees or 200 rupees to acquire a customer, and how much business do you get from him? How many times should he repeat? How often should he ride with you? So those metrics, and then I look at numbers like cost of repeat. And since I'm also focusing on app downloads, I look at how much does it cost us? How much does it cost for a customer to download the app? Something else, and yeah, it's highly analytical. It's all number driven, and it's a pain in the ass.
You're on video.
No, but it's really interesting, but it's a lot of work since we track our numbers daily, weekly, and monthly. So something like demand generation, you know, like there was a question like non-peak areas, non-peak time. How do you take care of that problem? But demand generation is a very hard thing to do. So we basically have 3 channels where we acquire customers from. It's either they'll call, either they'll come and book on the website, or they'll use the app. Right? So demand generation on all these channels. How do you take care of that? So that's one aspect of performance marketing. Then comes the brand bit, which is all the touchy-feely stuff. You know, what campaigns you run, the share of mind stuff. How do you make people remember the brand? How do you make them book the brand again? All of that stuff. So the other things we do is again SEO. Have you guys read about SEO, SEM, right? So that gets a lot of traffic on our website. So measuring those metrics again and handling and deciding what keywords to bid on, what makes sense from a management perspective. Apart from that, so I was working as a software engineer before this, and I had no marketing experience. But once I came to Taxi for Sure, I could see the responsibility that I have now. I am handling 7-8 figure budgets already. It's my 3rd week now. So, and that's a lot of money and that's a lot of responsibility. So you have to actually decide what channels you would target those budgets to, and how much traffic can you generate from there. So I work with Satej closely and in understanding the product, the conversion ratios, and then you project. Like let's say how much supply do I have in terms of number of cabs for the month of June. And based on that, I have to predict and project the demand that I'll be generating. Is it making any sense? So it's a tough task to do, and because again the biggest challenge we face is non-peak areas and non-peak time. Most of the times customers, unhappy customers go on Facebook, go and talk, call us names.
So yeah, so the brand stuff.
Yeah, so
yeah, so there is brand for all the. So the brand is something that affects all your stakeholders, right? It matters to the investor. An investor who talks to our co-founders, right? He's like, how come I hear about Ola and don't hear so much about you, right? So the brand stuff is very, very important, right? It's not just about how customers perceive you. Investors are there, people like you. If you've never heard of Taxi for Sure, if you think that, oh, it's a taxi company, right? Then you've lost something, right? When you hear of Uber, I'm sure a lot of you would like to work for Uber, right? The $1 billion of funding, Google has invested this and that, right? So what kind of employee branding do you create? What kind of branding do you create for your drivers? Just imagine those people. Many of them don't have a lot of education. What kind of a brand do you create for them so that they are flooding your gates trying to work with you? So very hard problems to solve all of these, and these are given to people who've never done this sort of thing before. And for better or for worse, that's how we do things, right? So Saurabh joins, third day is coming. Then what are you doing? Why are you wasting your time? Here it is. So go solve the non-peak problem. I don't know if that was what was told to him.
I was hired as a brand manager, but then moved into this performance marketing bit since our founders thought that that's what ISB gives you. It gives you the intellect to think numbers and be analytical. So apart from the touchy-feely stuff, performance marketing is one thing which you guys should definitely look at. And you'll have courses like NBDM and ANBM. So which are elsewhere in terms of, so which are going to give you great insights. If anybody is looking into digital marketing, then these are things you should have in your head. Read about SEO, read about SEM, read about app marketing, display ads and retargeting. It's actually used. Like, and I was an engineer before, so once I graduated, I couldn't relate. I studied a lot of stuff, but in my job, I couldn't understand. Why did I invest 4 years into engineering? Because I was doing something which was very different. But right now, I'm doing exactly what I learned at ISB. So that is one thing which you guys should really look at. It's not like engineering all over again. Do you have any questions from the marketing front? I'll try to answer these.
It's primarily digital marketing. What? It's primarily digital marketing.
No, we do a lot of offline stuff as well. So today, Delhi has an ad. Delhi Nissan Times has a front page ad on Taxi for Sure. So you guys check it out. So that, and then offline stuff also involves certain campaigns we run. Can't disclose the details here how we do it, but we target specific customers. So this framework, you see this harvest, context and DG. So harvesting is targeting the customers who will use your service then and there. So it's a very smart thing to do. Like if I can identify you are going to use the cab right now, I can give you a call. And do you want to book a cab? How do you do that is something which is confidential.
But a lot of below the line activities also happen both for drivers as well as for customers, right? So things like guerrilla marketing, you give out pamphlets when you are just walking somewhere. Like all those things we've tried, those don't really work for our kind of business, which is very context based, right? Unless you want to know it, you don't care about it. Right? We've done no parking boards around the city. Lot of stuff.
And since you are looking at this cost of customer acquisition, so you can't just go crazy and spend money to acquire 10 customers, right? So that's where harvesting comes into the picture. Target that customers who don't ride with you right then and there. Then there's context. Who will somewhere in the next 1 hour, 2 hours, take a cab. Target that customer. And then there's the final TG, which is target everyone, which ATL is, for which ATL, you guys know what ATL is, above the line marketing. So again, target your entire customer base, future or prospective customer base. So we try to harvest customers so that we spend little and gain as many new customers as we can.
So, just install an app and it is asking for so many permissions, which is like your.
That's not that, and we get a lot of these questions because people are worried about privacy and stuff. We ask for the contact list because now you can look for anybody else. You can access the address book and select your number, for example, and go to access somebody. That's not, don't worry. We're not doing something we are not going to be proud of. How are you doing on time?
So, we have the meeting till 1:30, but I think it shouldn't be a problem.
Sure. And again, so what I'll do is I'll put both of our numbers here. We can continue this conversation later as well. We are here, happy to be here however long it requires, but people have to step out, we won't be offended.
Please,
right, my number.
So that you were a coder and then now you've got to marketing. Can you please use the mic because they can't hear us on having it? Yes, you had mentioned that you were in coding and then now you're in marketing. Apart from academics in ISB, what are the things that you took up to bridge the gap?
So I did an ELP with theme music where I was consulting them on market growth. So that was one. Then I did a PAV which I was thinking of starting my own venture. So then marketing that, the go-to-market strategy for that. So that gave me a lot of learning. Apart from that, I was a software engineer as well as I was in band, which helped my interview a lot. Because then so I was interviewed as a band manager, right? So how did I manage to build the brand of the band in 3 years and take it to a national level? So things like that played. So even if you are a software engineer, you would have done things which can contribute to the role that you are going to be hired for. So take all those things into consideration and then apply and talk about those things, focus on those things in the interview. Product.
So product will, so I'll just walk through the startup stuff then. You don't mind? So here I just wanted to cover a few. Any guys here? Yeah. So wanted to cover a couple of things about startups, right? Just what to expect, whether you should take up a startup or not, why you should, which kind of startup to join, those kinds of things, right? I think if I'm able to brainwash you guys successfully, I think we'll have a much better result for the ISB name than if you guys go join a bigger company, right? So I have vested interest for multiple reasons. So let me just talk about it. It's a very heavy slide. Everybody can see it, right?
Yes.
Morning, guys. Yeah, cool. So yeah, just try to split it like this. This is on my based on personal experience. This is not something that's in any book or anything, right? I've talked to a lot of my friends, stuff like that. So if you just roughly split it into this kind of company, right? Early stage is say a company which is a seed round or maybe Series A, right? You guys understand the funding part of companies, right? So every company is a startup when it starts, right? Or if Flipkart is to in all practical terms, it's still a startup. Microsoft was a startup, Apple was a startup, Google was a startup, right? Companies, people come up with an idea, go to somebody, they give you seed money. Could be $100,000, $200,000, $1 million, whatever. You demonstrate something, somebody wants to take a leap of faith, invest in you because of your team or what you build, that's Series A. You have some more traction, your company does well, you get more money, Series B, and C, D, E, and so on. At any of those stages, you could go IPO. That's the liquidity event that you have. Another company could buy you, that is your M&A activity, right? So those are, or you could go bust, which is a very distinct possibility in the startup world, right? So that's something to be aware of. So your early stage companies, your Series A or C, growth is your Series A, Series B, Series C kind of company. Late is stuff beyond that. Mature is either a company like Flipkart or beyond, or your IPO companies, right? So I don't know which company that would make for early, but growth stage would be where Taxi for Sure, Ola, all of these companies are, right? Uber would be somewhere in the middle of growth and late, right? Because there was so much funds now. Now they just have to go to banks to raise more money. Right? So given this, right, I just thought these are some of the things that you would care about, so I've put those. So career growth in each of these companies, how your meteoric rise or slow and steady growth, right? It's guaranteed to be a meteoric rise in growth and early stage companies. You could be a rock star, join Google to connect, you have a digital marketing firm, let's connect, you have a company that does some incentives for something else, let's connect, stuff like that. I didn't have to do that, but in a growth stage company, that sort of commitment is a must. Right? Equity, late stage companies, mature companies don't really give you equity. Access to top management is very interesting. You will normally in big companies you won't even get to see VP, senior VP kind of thing, right? Here they're working shoulder to shoulder with co-founders who probably have prior success before, or who will end up becoming fantastic leaders in the future. So that's a great learning experience. Execution speed. So I think Saurabh can tell you, right? 3 weeks. I don't know how many things he has done and how many things he has learned. So it's a blinding pace that we have in a growth stage company, right? And over time it goes down. So if you guys want to test this, right, talk to your friends who join slightly bigger companies, your Flipkart or your I don't know what other big company, Imobi had come. Amazon is a very big company. Amazon actually might be an exception, but yeah. So talk to people in the bigger companies, find out what time they go home and after going home what they do, stuff like that, right? So the execution speed process is also good. If you guys have been in bigger companies before, you might get very unnerved because random stuff is happening. Growth stages, not so much randomness, but not too much structure either. So number of times you can screw up. I thought this would be an interesting metric for all the management students, right? Because you might not have done these sorts of things before. How many times can I make a mistake? Right? You guys probably all want to do, all have always done the right thing, right? But at a startup, you might not know what works, what does not work. So how many times can you screw up? That's clear, right? Yeah. What I thought would be interesting was talk about variance of experience, right? Because I could come here and tell you that, yeah, it's going to be amazing because I had an amazing experience, right? So I could tell you the same thing. But does that happen to every company? In early stage companies, the variance is going to be very high, right? One company could be very scary, right? I've talked to 2-3 people from my class, from class of 14, who joined a very early stage company. Things didn't work out so well, right? So of course, after that, they went on to find other great jobs, but they could have scary experiences either. Right, peer learning, unfortunately, that's the downside of earlier growth stage companies. Companies where they're too small to hire from good schools, hire experienced people, attract and retain those kind of people, right? You would probably be the smartest person around, right? So not all companies are lucky enough to hire from ISB, IIMs, IITs and stuff like that. But that's one thing to watch out for. What kind of peer learning you get. Right? Salary perks, that's again depending on what you're looking for. That could be a downward for you, right? ISB folks are expecting certain kind of salaries. They are expecting relocation, they are expecting a 5-star hotel when they move into their new jobs. Those are things that not all companies will be able to do, right? I think Saurabh was happy with the accommodation, but it's nowhere near 5-star, right? It's not something we do as a company. Vacation was another thing. I took a vacation after 11 months, right? And many Saturdays I've been either working from home or thinking about work or something like that. So vacation is something that you really have to ask what the vacation policy is. I mean, there was no vacation policy, but I couldn't take holiday. It was just too much. Chances you'll be happy. This is very subjective, right? I mean, it's just who you are and what makes you happy. So you will be happy in any of these kind of things. I'll just go through one more slide and then open up to questions. So how do you select a startup? This is kind of a subset of what is in the previous slide, right? So if you had to look for a team, what would you look for in the team? What have they done in the past? Do they have prior successes? Whether you like it or not, you will look at the kind of brand names they have on their resume, right? It's an indicator, right? You are here at ISB because you've done something great in the past. Right? If you didn't have any strong things that you've done, you wouldn't be here. Somebody else is saying, okay, somebody has done the hard work of figuring that out, and that's why these guys are at ISB. We'll hire them. Right? Similarly, you might want to look at certain indicators that maybe these guys will do. Right? So their past experience, success if they've had nothing like it. In terms of the industry in which, there was a question earlier that all the companies are making losses. Are you in the right industry? Those kinds of things you will have to do before you select the company, right? Very important. B2B, B2C, I gave an example earlier, right? If it's a B2C company, very different experience, very different kind of involvement with people than a B2B. But inherently, you might like one more than the other. So decide based on that as well. You're interested in that industry. I mean, taxi, who will join a taxi company? That's what I said initially, right? So if it just, that space just turns you off, don't even apply that, right? Because the job could be interesting, but day in, day out, like, what is it? I can't relate to B2B marketing for children growing, right? So if that happens, don't even apply, right? And think about how it's going to be relevant in the next few years, right? If this is something of a passing fad, do you want to work for another company that makes disappearing photos? I don't know, right? So think about that kind of stuff. The role, again, depending on your level of interest as well as future options, right? So if you're doing something which is very specific to that company, if it's very specific to an industry, it's not something that is translatable, right? So it makes things harder for you. Culture, you guys all know how to figure that out, but this will end up being more important than anything else when you're working for a small company, right? You will be working with 2-3 people very, very closely. If you can't get along with them, very difficult to make it work. So funding, there were questions, right, around funding. So who are the investors? That makes a lot of difference, right? If they are invested in big companies, they have a lot of great credentials, that makes a lot of difference. The amount that was invested, very clear sign, right, how the company is doing. The time between rounds is an interesting one. If there is too little time between rounds, then it could be that maybe the company is in trouble, maybe they have run out of money. If there is too much time, it's like, oh, haven't they been able to make too much traction? Why, like they raised one round now, 3 years later they are raising. Will the company do well? All of those things can come, right? But this is another thing to look at. The stage of the company, which I talked about earlier, right? Again, the final answer is going to depend on who you are and what you want to do, right? You look at your growth goals, what kind of growth the company will have along with it, right? And the salary, perks and vacation I talked about. So, again, you have personal commitments, you have certain expectations, right? So, ISB average salary I need, right? If that's your thing because of certain reasons, right? You can't compromise on that. So, it's not something that was important to me. So, I was okay with that, although various companies are cognizant of that fact, right? Nobody underpays when you come to ISB. So, yeah. That was all I had. Happy to open the floor to questions. Saurabh, do you want to add anything on this slide?
So, I've been working in startups. Like, this is my fourth startup now, and it keeps getting better every time. So I had never expected that I'll learn so much. I'll be handling so much in just the first month. It's 3 weeks now, and I was hoping I'd get a lot of time to chill. The first month I'll learn a lot from a lot of people. But then the learning happened. Learning is all hands-on. So I'm given a budget, spend it, get traffic. I have no clue how to do it, but I'm learning. So that's the good part. I've learned a lot in just these 3 weeks. And which might be very different for you. So if you can't handle the stress, that is one thing. Stress comes with a startup. There will be a lot of stress, but then it will be proportional to the learning you get. So if you feel that you can't work in a stressful environment and you can't compromise on a chilling time, then probably a startup is not the right thing for you.
One more thing I wanted to add is that you guys have taken a really big step coming here, right? So, all of you probably had fantastic jobs. I know you guys would have hated a manager and stuff, but you guys would have had a great career trajectory, right? And that would have continued to happen. You came here because you wanted to make a difference in that career, right? You wanted that sort of hockey stick improvement in that, right? And a startup is a great place to get that. You would be at a startup for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, you would become a senior person there, you would have cracked problems that even bigger companies might not have cracked before, right? Either you grow big with that company, stay with that company, or then you move on and you get a much bigger jump than you would normally get, right? So again, this is my, it's something I try to do with the class of 14 as well. In the OEP, talked a lot about it. Sure, I have some hand in more people going to startup, but you guys will make a huge impact if you go to a startup, right? If you join a mature company, yes, you will get salary, yes, you will get that brand name on your resume, but the amount of impact that you will make will be less. The amount of value add that you will do to future classes will be much less, right? So if I am at a certain position at Taxi for Sure, I will be able to tell my CEO that I believe in ISB, I will go and get these many ELPs, I will do a competition there, I will want to hire so many people from ISB, right? You might not have that much of a cloud when you go to an Amazon, Microsoft, and like that. I've seen the kind of experiences my friends have gone through. The happiest people are those at startups. two very senior people at Redbus are from my class. People are at Quicker, OLX, all of these companies, right, they are having a fantastic time. My Smart Price, a whole bunch of startups. Those are the guys who have not quit at all. Right? People in bigger companies which are not named, a lot of them have moved up. Right? So it's just one data point that I thought I'll share with you. So any questions that I might have pushed for later?
So a lot of us are from backgrounds, from non-startup backgrounds. A lot of us have worked in mostly mature organizations. So how should we, like if someone is planning to move to a startup, in the course of a year, what should we do or what should be your advice to those who are looking for such roles?
Sure. Yeah, very much. So all the stress and all the stuff that... Yeah. So the question was, you've never been in a startup, what should you do at ISB so that you don't, the number of times you screw up becomes as close to zero as possible, right? So, just as a very general thing before that, right? Startup is a regular company only. Google was a startup, Amazon was a startup. So it's just a regular company. It's just at a different stage. That is one thing, right? So that way nothing very radically different is required at a startup. But some of those things that I mentioned, right? The level of commitment that will be required, the kind of speed at which you want to execute, those are the things. And exactly like what Saurabh said, those are things that I will prepare you for. So when you go in there, you will be very data oriented, you will be very meticulous in your planning, you will be prepared to do night outs if required, right? And I am like very close to competing with my consulting friends for amount of time I'm thinking about my job, right? So they are doing it because they are in client side, I am doing it because I really like what I'm doing, right? So commitment required, those are the sort of things that you really have to prepare for. Day in, day out, can you keep doing that stuff? So in terms of other core job related things, right? I don't know if that's something you really have to prepare for. That was another question, right? So you don't really have to prepare for anything specific because most startups will be okay to experiment, take a chance on a person based on their skill level.
Could you talk about the growth of the company over the past 3 years in terms of the team size and revenues and number of customers?
Sure. The question was around the size of the growth of the company in terms of various metrics, right? So the company started in June 2011. We got first round of funding in December of 2011, which was $1 million. That was Axel, Helion, and Bloom. Axel is invested in Facebook and a bunch of other value companies. Bloom, I don't remember which one. I always forget. And Helion is Myntra, Flipkart, all of these companies, right? That time we were about maybe 20 employees or something. About a year after that, like January, February of 2013, we raised Series A. That was $3 million, again same investors. That time the company might have been 100, 150 employees, but the senior people must have been maybe 10 at that time, right? In May is when I joined, a whole bunch of other school people joined that time. And we raised, as we had before, and Bessemer joined us. Bessemer is invested in OLX in India, and LinkedIn, Yelp, Pinterest, all these companies in the US. Right? In terms of growth in transactions that we've had, right? Starts obviously at 0. Last year we were, remember the number, around this time we must have been at 500, 600 number of transactions every day. So this is people taking a taxi ride in one day, right? And we're in 3 cities. As of today, we're in 4 cities. 4th was just launched, right? And now we'll see a lot of rapid expansion. And we are doing anywhere from 5,000 to 5,500 trips a day. Right? So just imagine 5,000 people in a city are affected by your service, right? But over time, in a day, in a period of a month, how many thousands of people are using your service? Growth has been great. Team growth, I talked about funding, transactions, anything else?
So you're about 150 employees right now?
Oh, sorry. Today we are at about 450 employees. The senior people would be maybe 20, 25. Right? The technology team, the engineering staff is about 25, 30.
We have a call center.
Yeah, so majority of the staff is call center or the operations people, so that's about...
Who handle the operators and the various...
Yeah, exactly. So that is the majority of the staff. But senior people are still about 20, 25.
Are you guys senior or what?
How big is your analytics team?
So analytics team was about 8, 9 people. So right now we're trying to figure out how exactly to place that team, because they do this sort of predictive analysis which is trying to solve